Good evening, my friends. I wanted to touch on a topic that's really close to my heart tonight because it was a really big deal for me in my life before now, and I think I've forgotten how far I've come with it and how much that means, how much freedom I've gained because of how far I've come. And that's the topic of suffering and the overall, what C.S. Lewis calls the problem of pain. How can there be a benevolent God if there's suffering in the world? I do not pretend to have, the answer to that question, but I want to offer my life experience and my perspective. Um, and yes, again, I generally make this for everyone who's interested, but those who are in the process of recovery from a chronic illness or people who've been through a lot of suffering in their lives, very intense suffering that makes them question everything, that this is for you. So, for what it's worth, here it is. So I grew up, how to say this? I was raised Catholic, and it's not the actual Catholic faith, but part of the particular flavor that and how it got communicated that I was raised with was that I got this idea repeated in a very heavy way often, that I was meant to suffer, that suffering was like a very high good, and I should allow myself to suffer a lot, and that I should pursue it and accept it and just lay down and take it. Where this led me to was being too ill to be able to take care of my family with chronic illness. And when I reached that point, I was like, I don't believe in a God who would create a situation like this. This is not good. There is nothing life-giving here. This is just death, and not the good kind. And that was when I found DDRS, and I threw all of that out because I was like, I don't believe in a God who brings me to that place of death. I don't. And so I just threw everything out because I couldn't believe in that. I couldn't believe in what I was experiencing, that it had anything to do with the God that I believed in, or God I was willing to believe in, we'll put it that way. So I pursued joy, and I pursued love, and I pursued peace and gratitude and relaxation and goodness and beauty. And that healed me. It healed my body, it healed my heart, it healed my soul. And I did that for years. I really pursued and always consciously chose those things. But then I reached a point where I needed, and one of the things I tell myself all the time is I only want God. God is the only thing I want. He's the only thing I have. He's the only thing I want. That's been my spirituality. That's been who I am for a very long time. And there came a point where I needed to experience, I recovered, and I was able to experience negative emotions without having them make me ill again. So I started, experiencing more challenges in my life in the later stages of recovery as I started reintegrating into my life. And I became acquainted with suffering, I think, as it's meant to be experienced in a healthy person. That's because I was actually healthy and able to experience it with a solid foundation of having experienced goodness. I had focused on letting love into the deepest part of my being over and over and over and over and over again. And so I had come to experience the goodness of God. I came to experience that everything that before had been sharp and raw and painful and grating and irritating all of a sudden became playful and lighthearted and easy and soft, and the world felt like such a soft and beautiful place. And then I started having challenges again. So I had this, and I through that time, I had this experience of turning away from that when I was in recovery of, again, like people talk about being addicted to things like drugs or alcohol or pornography. I was addicted to suffering. I was addicted to my pain. And anytime I realized that because my brain had been that way for a long time, that I was unconsciously rejecting the answer to my prayer because I was so used to only accepting pain. And when I caught myself doing that in the later stages of recovery, I vowed that I would never not have faith ever again, because I realized, it was just one of these moments of true repentance, and I felt absolutely, it was just it was what a lot of people call conviction. It was just a moment of like, I'm never, ever, ever doing that again, no matter what it takes. And never rejecting good things or not choosing to have faith because I can't wait a little while longer or accept that I don't understand why this pain is happening right now. I had enough experiences of kind of chomping at the bit and trying to get out of the gate too quickly and trying to understand things that were too high for me to reach. And it was, it felt horrible. It felt horrible to do that. So I committed to never doing it again. And it saw how it held true for me every time I held out and had faith that God came through, that the divine came through, and that things worked out if I had faith. And so I had enough experiences of that I committed to that way of being. And then after recovery, by the way, if you're early on in your journey, don't watch this. Turn it off now. My life just unraveled, for lack of a better word, and in pretty much every way it could have. And there was a lot of suffering involved. There was heartbreak over everything. I felt like it was just like, yeah, it's, and I understand now exactly at the side of things, I understand why everything played out the way it did. But part of what happened was because of the intensity of my experiences, and they were all experiences I needed to have for sure. But part of what happened in that experience of the pain and suffering after recovery was the conviction that no one should ever have to go through this. No one should ever have to suffer this way. That the way I had lived my life and the things I had believed and the kind of suffering that creates, no one should ever have to experience. I also got very good at being with myself through my pain and being comfortable with it and being able to sit with not having answers and not knowing and just hurting and crying and moving through it and choosing to have hope and picking myself up again and again and again because I had faith. I chose faith. I chose hope. I chose to believe that there was a purpose to it. And part of it was for me because I've my spirituality, my experience of God, I've like I said, he's all I want. And I found him there in the pain. I felt that the pain was very much a burning away of everything that was keeping me from what I wanted. So in a way it was like, okay, this pain, I can tell after time, experience and experience again, that it was the answer to my prayer because it was purifying me of everything that was in the way of me getting what I wanted. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to complain about this anymore. I'm going to say thank you every time the pain comes. So every time I have had a painful experience, I force myself to say thank you. And sometimes it is very difficult because when you're in a spike or an ebb or you're in a really tough situation, it is hard to say thank you when you haven't seen the solution yet. And you're just like, oh my God, not again. But that's what I've trained myself. And even if I have to do it through clenched teeth to be like, thank you. I'm going to say thank you no matter what it takes. And one of the reasons, one of the things that was born of that was that I have become comfortable with suffering and pain in myself and in others, and it doesn't scare me anymore. And aside from, like, yes, and in my life, I see how when I have faith and how the pain is changing me, and it's making me capable of having all the things I asked for. Because a lot of times we hold on to what we have because it's familiar, and what we asked for is unfamiliar, and our own brain is like, oh, no, don't let go of this. And it hurts to rip it away from yourself or allow it to be taken away from you, whatever you have that's familiar, that you thought was what you wanted, in order to be given what you actually want, which you can't even conceptualize if it's something you've never experienced before. If you ask for something you've never had, you're not even going to know what to look for. So it's like, a lot of times we get in our own way in terms of receiving what we actually want. And so that's one way that's changed my relationship to pain and suffering in my own life, and my own experiences. And the other thing that happened was that I became a person who I'm comfortable with other people suffering, and I can sit with them, and I can be with them, and I can hold them while they cry, I can hold them while they scream, I can be with them while they're mad at God and me and everyone, and it doesn't bother me anymore, because I've done that for myself. And people like that, the people I've experienced like that in my life that aren't me, those are the kind of people that make me believe in a God who is good. Because part of what gets called into question, and for me, I didn't even realize, in September or so of last year, I found myself realizing that I still didn't really believe that God was benevolent. And that's a really hard thing when you're going through a really difficult process. If you want to trust in the divine, or even just the nature of life. If you don't believe in God, like, is life good? Is life bad? Is it evil? Like, what's it about here? If you don't believe there's an inherent goodness to things, it's very hard to pull yourself out of a dark place. I don't know how one would go about doing that, if you don't believe in goodness in general. So believing in benevolence, the benevolence of the universe, God, life, however you want to phrase that or look at it. A lot of times when we've experienced trauma, we don't trust good things. That's something that gets lost. We start to just be chronically suspicious of everything good. It's like not a very fun way to live life. And but then when I saw, because I opened myself up and I was like, okay, just do whatever you're gonna do here, because like clearly I don't know what I'm doing. I just keep screwing things up when I try to take over and control things. So you just take over. Like, you know what I want more than I do. You know what I need more than I do. I'm just going to cooperate with things and be obedient and let this be simple, because I'm tired of suffering because I'm fighting, fighting what I want, fighting getting what I want. So that happened, and then I was like, wow, I've turned into the kind of person who made me believe in God to begin with. Like, the kind of people who could be with me and not need to understand my pain and not question me and not try to fix me and not try to lecture me or preach at me, would just be there with me when I was suffering. And yeah, I was like, well, if my suffering, if accepting and going through my suffering not only made me, like, not only did I realize it was actually the answer to my prayers a lot of times, going through that and choosing to experience that pain as God himself trying to break me away from the things that were actually hurting me so that I could receive the new thing. Now that I understand brain function, that our brain is terrified of the new and is very unhealthily attached to the familiar. Once I kind of got intimate with that process and familiar with it, I began to see, pain and suffering almost as just the opposite side of the coin of joy and love. Like, the more, and because I became so much softer, I started to have compassion for people. I stopped being angry. When I see people, it's like, if someone's in a bad mood, I assume, well, they need love, because I know for me, when I'm in a bad mood, I need love, right? And who knows what they could be suffering through, because I've now gone about my life knowing I'm going through hell inside, and my entire life is falling apart, and the people in my life have no idea that this is happening. None of them. Because I'm not going to put my, my personal business out there. So, but it then made me like, it just changes your perspective on everyone. It's like, who knows what anyone could be going through. And I know for me in those times, like, if one cashier is nice to me, or someone gives me a compliment, or is like extra forgiving and kind, like, it could make me cry because I've just in such a difficult place. And it's like, it's the kind of people who have gone through suffering and had faith through it that come out the other side being living, walking evidences that there is benevolence, however you want to call it. There is a God that is good, the universe is good, life is good. There is a deep testimony to that through that. So obviously, I haven't died yet. I don't know all the answers, but that's my life experience and how I've come to have a healthy relationship with suffering. The other thing is I've stopped choosing it. I affirm, because of my path, that I'm never going to choose suffering for myself for its own sake. It's not a good in and of its own. It's kind of a necessary part of life. And again, it's not that everything happens for a reason, or that these things have meaning, that suffering has meaning. We bring meaning to it by what we choose to do with it and the perspective we choose to take. And that was very different, because I was always raised like, oh, God can't, he's not going to give you more than you can handle, and suffering has meaning. But I was, no, that's BS. You bring the meaning to the suffering. Suffering itself is not a good, it's not something to pursue. And when you don't choose it for yourself, when it comes your way, I can now see it as kind of part of the package and the parcel of what I've asked for. Every good thing I've asked for requires that I become a person capable of receiving it and of creating what I want. So I need to go through whatever I need to go through to become that person. So yeah, that's my, as of this point in my life, blip about suffering, hope, and benevolence of the divine, or the universe, or however you want to put that. But yeah, so I just hope that this, because I had someone ask me about this in the last week, and I realized, actually several people asked me about this in the last week, and I realized that, yeah, for those of us who've gone through trauma, these are important questions if we're going to begin to trust in life itself again. In order to have a positive experience of it, it's important to have good reason to believe that there is benevolence to the order of things in this world. So I hope that this offers hope and encouragement for anyone suffering, because I've been through a lot of suffering, and more than anything, I wish to be able to be there for others who are going through those experiences. So all of my love to you. You can do this.